Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another Raymarc Solutions webinar. Raymarc is highly repeatable, best practice IT system management and service delivery. We strive to satisfy the ever-increasing demand to cut cost, increase efficiencies, and align ourselves with the goals of your business. BMC Service Desk Express is sunsetting at the end of 2017, and support will no longer be available. If you have SDE, contact us at 844-FLYCAST, that's 844-359-2278, and we can successfully migrate you to another solution that best fits your business's needs.
For today's webinar on Footprints 12.1, what's new and what's going on with this product? It looks like we've got a contingency from all over the place today. We've definitely struck a chord with a lot of interest in this presentation. I've got folks from the Midwest and in Canada and down in Texas and Florida, and I want to thank you for taking their time out of your busy day to attend one of our presentations. I especially want to thank Greg Gielda, who's been with FlyCast Partners almost since its inception. He has a proven history in leadership, consulting, ITIL implementation, and developmental stewardship of all ITIL best practice disciplines, including change management, problem management, incident management, ITIL configuration, and release management. Now, Greg has several hundred implementations of Footprints under his belt. So he's very familiar with this tool and the evolution of this tool. So who better to talk about this subject than Greg Gielda? And he's well into the second decade of the IT industry, so I think you might know what he's talking about on this. Without further delay, I'm going to turn this over to Greg Gielda. And Greg, it really looks like we've struck a nerve today because we have quite the audience and it's growing by the second.
That's a good thing, and there's some folks out there that I definitely recognize. I want to wave my hand to Lynn Mayer from University of Albany, who is attending. She and I worked together many years back, and it's great to see her out there. So, hey, Lynn, glad you could join us today. In addition to Lynn, we have a bunch of people from all over North America, all over the U.S. and Canada and other places. So we thank you very much for taking time out of your day. And what we want to talk about today is Footprints V12, specifically 12.1, which is the most recent release. There's some trailing digits after that, but the 12.1 release is really the most recent one. And I want to set the table for everybody because, of course, Footprints is known to some of you on the call. Some of you may be running earlier versions of the product. Some of you, this may be the first time you've seen any element of this family of solutions. So let's talk just a little bit about what the solution is and isn't. First things first, Footprints is 100% web-based. And as you may have seen right now, I am logged into a web page. I'm using Chrome as my browser. It doesn't really matter. You can use literally any browser that you want. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and start a new Internet Explorer session, and I'm going to launch my local host for Footprints here because I am just hosting this locally on a Mac VM, actually, on a VM slice that's running Windows on my Mac laptop. And I'll log in to this in Internet Explorer. Footprints doesn't really care which browser you're using. And in this case, our customers are logged into this portal and showing some ways that they could access the solution. And our technicians, or agents, as they're called in Footprints, are logged in on this side so that you can kind of see what their view of the solution could be. Now, the one thing that's important about Footprints is that the view could be is really what the emphasis is, right? You get to tune and tweak Footprints to your heart's content. It is a totally codeless solution. So there's no app that's required, right? There's no client because it's all web-based. There's no code that you have to write anywhere, no scripts, no Java, no other languages you have to know. You don't have to know how to spell DBA or SQL in order to make the product work. So the DBAs become kind of the Maytag repair gals and guys. They don't have anything to do on the database side to maintain Footprints. Yet under the hood, the solution is extremely powerful. And for those of you who are running the solution, you probably already know this, right? You have the ability to create and model many types of processes in Footprints because it uses a concept known as the workspace. right? The workspace is the collection of all of the stuff you need to run your process. You could think of it as the form that you pass around in Word, right? Or maybe you have several of those forms that you pass around to different people for different kinds of requests. Each workspace in Footprints lets you manage the routing of all of those requests, so you can manage your facilities requests, your legal investigations, your biomedical services, security investigations, application development, even change requests, of course, and typical fulfillment requests, service request incidents. All of those processes can be managed inside of the solution so that you can view everything through a single pane of glass, yet give everyone who uses the tool their own unique way of being able to interact with it. And that means that from your perspective, you can see everything that's happening in the organization in a single place, but you can also grant abilities for different departments or different segments. You know, if you happen to be at a college, they certainly are fragmented internally. Oftentimes, separate deans have their own fiefdoms and their own systems of record. Footprints allows everybody to have their own unique workspace in such a setting while still giving you a central place where you can manage and control and compare apples to apples. Now, Footprints is codeless, Footprints is web-based, we know that, and Footprints uses a unique concept called the workspace. And those things have remained exactly the same since Footprints' inception. I've been working with the product since version 7, so by no means, you know, since the initial contrivance was developed many years ago. We're 10 years back now. But I've certainly been working with it long enough to see hundreds of implementations. And the solution has implemented very smoothly in all those environments because of those facts, right? Because you don't need an app to push around, because you don't need code or code writers to maintain it. Folks who can click a mouse and fog up a mirror can generally run Footprints. Even people who are not technical have the ability to be able to make the tool work. To talk about a couple of terminologies that we'll use today, we already talked about the concept of the workspace, but I want to talk about some of the user terms, right? Footprints really is divided up into two primary user types. They are customers. Customers are you when you're shopping at Target, right? That's a customer. They are getting the services provided for them. Therefore, in customer lingo, Target would never ask you to restock one of their end caps, right, when you're shopping at Target. And in Footprints, you're not going to assign customers to do any work either, right? They are the free users of the system. They can access the system by calling you, by emailing in, or of course they can access the system by going directly to a service catalog like this, or simply reporting an incident and opening up a brand new request in the system so that they can request the service that they need. So customers are free. You can have as many of them as you'd like in the solution. There is no cost, no licensing cost at all. But they can't be assigned tickets because, again, your shopping excursion at Target should not include a restocking of their end caps or anything of the sort. But if you look at it from an agent perspective, which is the other terminology that we'll use here, agents include people who can be assigned to tickets, right? These are the people who do work for Target, and therefore they will be assigned to do their end cap work and other work inside of the store. Agents, technicians, are the people who are licensed inside of Footprints, and that licensing model is available in either a shared concurrent model, right? So you have an open parking spot in your parking lot. A concurrent license model means that any open spot a user can use, right? One of your technicians, your agents. But if you want fixed or named licenses, you can give those to people who administer the solution, for example, or for people who work on your service desk or help desk so that they can be in the tool 24/7 and nobody will ever be calling for their license to be used. So a very flexible licensing model. Now, that codeless piece of Footprints we're going to talk a little bit about later, but I want to start talking about some of the features and capabilities of the product, especially where they started to diverge a little from earlier versions. For those of you who are on the call who have been working with the tool for quite some time now, and maybe on a different version, maybe the 11 series or 10 series or something earlier, this version of the tool looks, acts, feels, smells, and is a completely different product. In fact, V12 is actually a rewrite. The code that they had built Footprints on in the past was rather outdated scripting language, right? And so rather than continue to try to build inside of that language, they had decided we're not going to do that anymore. And this was actually Numara before BMC acquired them more than a couple years back. They were already in the works with V12. So when BMC did acquire them, they looked at this product and said, hey, we're keeping it, right? We're not going to get rid of it, and we're going to push this product to market. So version 12 was actually being developed by Numara Software before BMC acquired them. And now BMC continued that and produced a product that is in every respect footprints, but also much more powerful than it used to be. So let's talk a little bit about our home screen, right, that we're looking at here. This is just one of like a bazillion ways in which you could really configure footprints to be interactive with you. So the stuff that we see on our discussion today is by no means what you get, right, or what you're stuck with. Many solutions leave you sort of staring at the screen going, wow, I wish I could add my own fields. Or wow, if I added my own fields, I wish I could report on them. But Footprints allows you to do both of those things, right? Add your own fields, create your own routing, create your own business rules and workflow processes, even visual workflow capability. We're going to talk about that in a bit. But Footprints lets you do all of that stuff without ever touching the single line of code. There isn't even a place in the solution to do that. So on our home screen, you can see that I've got some widgets up top. These are just simple searches, right? These searches can be anything, like showing me only the critical issues or showing me all the level 1 tickets. Notice that I can include the level 1 tickets as well as a separate tab down below. And in fact, for those of you who have used Footprints before, you're going to notice that all these tabs that are down here are foreign to you. This is not the way the home screen ever looked before. And for those of you who are really sharp, you also notice that up in this corner, there is no workspace that I am in anymore. Old versions of Footprints used to make you log into a specific workspace as your default one. So if you were a service desk agent, right, somebody that worked at the service desk, you probably would log in as your default workspace, your service desk workspace, and the facilities workspace wouldn't be the one you logged into by default. Everything was done through a workspace in Footprints. And the only way to view the world, the only way to administer the product at that stage was through a workspace, right? So if you did your work in incident and then you wanted to go do a change, you would leave the incident workspace and go to the change management workspace and create a record there. But in V12, all of that has changed. You used to have to go to the mountain. Now the mountain actually comes to you. So you can now bring all the information that you need directly to your home screen, and that home screen has even got a new name. It's referred to as your console, right? Your home console, with the actions that you have, and I know I have a lot of them up here, but that's because I wanted to show you a lot of functionality. The abilities that you have are all of these separate consoles, and the collection of them is known as your portal, right? What you're able to see. Your customer can also gain access to their consoles and portals, so they can see their own screen, their own home screen, or they can view the service catalog console and gain access to the services that you may offer, IT services or whatever they happen to be. And this allows your customer to place requests directly to the system with a minimum amount of interaction, right? So if it's desktop services and you need them to be able to request a new computer, just like on Amazon, they can drill in and get a write-up of what the product looks like, some information you would like to convey to your customer, for example, and they can order that particular service that you're asking for just by saying, yeah, I'm going to request this. The same as you would actually say, order me that new couch from Amazon. It'll put it in your shopping cart. We don't have a cart here per se. What we do have instead is an order blank that now says, hey, we're filled out for ordering and configuring a new PC. So the customer can, of course, interact this way. They can call you, which they usually do probably, right? And they can also email you. So emails taken in by Footprints will be parsed by one of those workspaces, because a workspace acts just like a human does. It reads emails like a human would read them, and it has the ability to automatically create tickets and automatically respond to your customer as a result. So as you can see, my customer in this case didn't have to do anything. All they did was say, yeah, I want one of those. And the process is now continuing behind the scenes, which can include any authorizations necessary to ensure that that particular PC that they ordered gets approved. When we look at things from back on our agent side, you're going to see some things when you compare the differences between this and earlier versions of Footprints in particular. You're going to see some things that are really different, right? First things first, I have buttons now in Footprints. Yes, buttons. I know you could never create a button in the earlier versions of the product. So for those of you who used to use Footprints or are still using it right now in an earlier incarnation, these buttons are a thing of beauty. This is how you can get access to all the stuff you need without having to drill into a workspace, right? Without having to see things from the context of that workspace. Imagine if you were piloting the International Space Station, right? And you had to move to 17 different places in order to actually control the ship. That would be a very embarrassing console to try to use because you're hopping all over the place to try to make it work. Or worse yet, imagine if a pilot had to do that in an aircraft. So the console needs to provide the information necessary to make the thing work. In old versions of the product, every workspace that you went into was its own separate instance, right? Its own separate console full of stuff, which made it very difficult to get a full united picture. Still a great product, but very difficult to get that full united picture out of it. In V12, since all of this information comes to you, I can now say, you know, I would like to create a new incident record. Everybody picks on incidents, so I'll do the same. So I want to create a new incident record, and I've just brought that new incident record up. You can kind of see how it looks here on the screen. The info that I'm displaying here is by no means the end, right? Nor does it even have to be your beginning. You can have a workspace configured to do any kind of function that you can imagine. And just to give you an idea of what I mean, I'm going to bring up a legal investigation workspace to show you what that looks like, a ticket in one of those that I've created. This is now tracking the investigations for legal matters, from the preservation of the legal information to the collection of the legal information. And all of this detail, of course, fully functional so that you can make choices and changes here that are completely different from the kind of work that you would track if you were managing an incident request, right? Or some other type of request. So Footprints with its workspaces can bring you all the functionality that you need for whatever your process is. Those workspaces can be configured point and click, no code, to be able to do the stuff that you needed to do. And of course, you can then enter your information here and capture your contact and start taking that ticket. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull me up. So here's my first name. And one of the things you'll notice for those of you working in the old version of the product is that we now have these links all over the form. You're going to see more of them later. These link controls, as they're referred to, allows Footprints to gather information from other aspects of itself and bring that information to bear on whatever ticket you'd like. So that means if I need contact information from the address book to be present on my incident record, that I can just say, hey, you know what, link to one of the Gregs. And you can see there's a couple of me out here. So I'll go ahead and pick me. Pick me. I just did. So now I've linked myself to this particular record. You can see some of my contact information is here. You can also, of course, see that my information is linked here from the address book itself. And I can easily open my record in the address book if I'd like to see what that looks like. And now I have my contact information here. I've updated some of Greg's information. You can see all my general information. You can also see a history of every ticket that I've ever opened. Some of them were critical, etc. They're flagged in red. So this is a very different experience in Footprints for those of you used to it. The address book and everything else in Footprints are now objects. Right? It's really now become an object-oriented solution where the data comes to you and the information that you create is reusable instead of sort of very linear like it used to be on a workspace by workspace basis. Now, one of the other things you probably noticed, guys, was that if, for those of you especially using the old version of the product, I'm not single-threaded anymore, right? I can work on my legal issue and then go back to working on my incident request, and then I can go and open a new change request if I want to, and that can be up on the screen at the same time as my incident request, right? So I'm not bound to the workspace like I used to be. In the old versions of the product, if you wanted to open a change, you would switch to the change workspace because it contained all the information and all the routing detail, all the workflow necessary to manage change requests, which are different animals, of course, than an incident request would be, which has its own workspace to manage that stuff. Facilities, of course, would have their own workspace to manage their requests. And no matter what the request is, it's now brought to you right on your home screen instead of you having to go get it. And I can have multiple ticket types open at the same time so that I can pop easily between them. Even if I wanted to open up a facilities request, for example, I could take a look at what that looks like and see that, yeah, the facilities request, very different. It has facilities categories. It has facilities prioritizations, facilities statuses, things that are simply different than you would expect to see in an incident request, right? So Footprints really takes on the persona of whatever function you needed to take on via that workspace function. But unlike old versions of the product, the workspaces are now brought directly to you. you don't have to go into those workspaces. And when we talk about how things have changed administratively, you'll also see where that makes a big difference. Now, when I look at my incident request, I've linked myself to it. You can see I can fill out a short description, help me. I'm probably beyond that, but that's okay. In my case, we happen to have notes that are internal. These aren't visible to the customer, and we can easily verify that because when you look at the customer version of an incident form, and right now my customer, of course, has this particular record open, but if I move over and say I'm going to open that incident, this is the customer version of the exact same form that I was looking at. So the customer's version doesn't look anything like the technician or agent version deliberately, because you don't want your customer to have to fill out all those fields. If you gave your customer all the fields that we gave our technicians, they'd call you. I wouldn't fill out the form, right? They'd be like, I'm to the heck with this, I'm going to call you up. So nice to know that you can have internal information passed around between technicians in Footprints. Of course, your issue log and knowledge base, that means that you can certainly look up information in the knowledge base if you'd like to, and you can have multiple knowledge bases inside of Footprints, including a biomed knowledge base if you want to create one of those, or standard knowledge base information. I'm going to look up, just going to look up the word in this case, come back with these articles. Now you can have Footprints automatically parse that information back to the KBE based on fields that you're using in the form, so that way you can automatically do the search for the content that's necessary. I just kind of shortcutted this to give you the idea that yes, you can search for it as well. So how do I create a custom dictionary? We'll just go ahead and copy that resolution right into the ticket. And now the knowledge base article has been created inside of the ticket. I didn't have to do a thing. I just told Footprints to include it. And if I really want to see that knowledge base article in full glory, I can look at it. And this is actually in the ticket. So I'm scrolling through the entire ticket right now to see the description field that contains my knowledge base article copied automatically out of the knowledge base. And by the way, the knowledge base then gets incremented, of course, and now it's more popular because we used it to fix something. You can also see I've included a link to our asset system, which is BMC's client management. And this solution brings back the asset data that I have. So in this case, it's showing me the asset for my virtual machine. So I'm running a VM slice. I'll go ahead and slide that over real quick. You can see I'm running that. That's El Capitan on my Mac. And I'm running a virtual machine slice to actually do my demo from. So it pulled this information back. And when integrated with BMC's client management solution, which helps you manage your assets, you can then avoid all of the desk side support by simply coming here, remote controlling that machine, transferring it a file, requesting a new audit, or checking out any additional information about it you need, thus avoiding the desk side visit, avoiding the sneaker net across campus or across town or across the country. And you have the ability to, of course, manage and view those assets right inside the tool. You can categorize the requests as you would typically expect, right? And all this information, of course, is completely customizable and tweakable by you. So no matter what your categories are, even your own category, or maybe you choose software, you can have subcategory, additional information to fill in. All of this is entirely up to you, entirely. For those of you who know Footprints, you'll know that you only had one assignee field, and it was very tiny. You can now have big assignee fields, and you can have multiple. So you can have a primary owner and a secondary owner, right? The service desk owns the ticket from start to finish, even if it's assigned to third-level support, because they just happen to be the service provider the service desk evoked to deliver the service. But ultimately, the service desk, the first point of contact, is still accountable for getting that delivered. And then you see more of these link controls, right? The ability to link tickets. Now, in the old version of Footprints, you could do this. You could link tickets together, join them up, and that was a bit of a convoluted effort. In old versions of Footprints, to link two tickets together of any kind, you first had to create one of the tickets that was going to be a part of the link and save it. Then you had to create the other ticket that was going to be a part of the link and save it. Then you had to bring one of those two tickets you just saved back up in what was called details mode, read-only mode on that ticket. Then you had to choose from the top of the screen to link. Then you had to remember the ticket number of the other ticket that you didn't pick in the first round, right? The one that you saved before that you wanted to link to, and the workspace that ticket was in. And then you could finally link to it and view the ticket as linked and related back to the original request. Kind of a convoluted set of steps in order to join two tickets that happen to have something to do with each other. Footprints has changed all that. right? Now, if I say, you know what, I have this issue happened to have been caused by a change. I know I did a change over the weekend that caused this, so I'm going to link to the change request that caused it. Yeah, email server, there it is, that's the culprit. I didn't have to save this ticket first. In fact, if I didn't have the change request for it, but I knew that there was a change that should have been put in, I can just choose to create the change request right now from inside of the incident record. And when I do, Footprints will automatically create a brand new change record. And it's going to show up right here, create linked. You can see my change types are already defined here. So we now have a change request that I've created from inside of an incident record. For those of you on older versions of Footprints, you can pick your jaw up off the floor because that ability is something that you've probably sorely missed. But quite honestly, having that capability in V12 has really helped extend the capability and use of this product quite a bit. So sure, we can relate incidents. We can still do master and sub-tickets just like we used to be able to, so you can have additional tasks. In fact, those tasks can be automatically created as templates just like you used to be able to do. You can, of course, attach documents if you want to, and you can attach whatever documents you'd like. That capability exists like it used to. But the fact that I have all this information brought to me now, and the fact that I don't have to drill workspace to workspace anymore, means that Footprints has the ability to bring in any information, including linked configuration items, right, directly from inside the system. Hey, this is actually an issue with Microsoft Exchange. I've just linked that CI to this incident record, right from there. And if I really needed to see that information, of course, I could drill in and view the configuration item from here. So Footprints has been changed up quite a bit into an object-oriented solution that allows me to no longer single thread. I'm no longer stuck inside of a workspace tube in which I have to leave the tube and then go into a different tube in order to work on a different kind of request. I can simply create whatever kind of request I need right here and modify them to my heart's content without ever having to leave the comfort of my home console, right? So that's a huge, huge difference. Of course, the ability to sort of scroll that thing up and down with the tongue is also a big difference in the way it used to work. Now, for those of you who have used older versions of the product, you might have noticed that I've been scrolling up and down the screen here. I have tabs. Tabs is the way that technicians primarily interfaced with Footprints before. Although your agents, your technicians in Footprint, your agents had the ability to set a preference that allowed them to either use this method, right, to move from section to section, or that allowed them to scroll up and down the screen in what was called expand collapse sections. But you couldn't do both at once. That was impossible. Now, you can scroll up and down the screen if you're a scroller, but if you'd prefer to just drill right into the time tracking ability or take a look at the assignee section, you can do that too. So you're no longer bound by one way of viewing your ticket as a technician. You can see it any way that you'd like. And that applies to customers too. In the old version of the product, customers could only scroll up and down. That was the only choice I had. They could move through the ticket this way and nothing else. Now, customers can interface and move through the tabs this way if they want to, or they can simply scroll up and down through the page as they'd like. So very, very, very different in terms of how you interact with the solution. But one of the things that I definitely want to talk about is how the tool administers, right? Because Footprints has really changed itself up in the way you can construct some of this stuff. We're going to take a quick peek under the covers as to how the sausage is made, and then we'll talk a little bit about reporting capabilities of the tool, because that's also been completely revamped. First things first, let's talk about administrative capability. I guess I'll go ahead and save that, why not? If I'm missing any information, of course, any fields that I've designed as mandatory are going to be placed into a warning box that says, hey, these fields must be filled in, they're required. So you're not going to have anybody submitting a request, customer or technician. No one's going to submit a request without all the fields being filled in that you asked for. So pretty simple there. And by the way, you also notice that this says INC 51, right? I can now put prefixes in front of my ticket names and numbers so that I have the ability to note the difference between them. And you can see INC1 is different from EDDS or Biomed, right? Which is different from some of the other ticket types that I've created as well, because I also have service requests in my list here, project requests, etc. And they all have their own unique ticketing, which is completely foreign to earlier versions of the product. Let's talk a little bit about administration, because things have dramatically changed here. For those of you used to old versions of the product, this is really a foreign place. You used to have to come up to the top and choose administration system or administration workspace or administration address book, depending on what you were at. Administration workspace took you into the workspace admin for the workspace you were in. So you could change workspaces and then administer the workspace all from up here. And it was really just a list of blue links, not particularly friendly. They've changed all of that. All system administrative functions are now here, over here on this side, right? Including some system settings that I've expanded out for you to see a little easier. So all that ability is now here. This is all there is to system admin. And the system itself runs off of what are really called objects or containers in Footprints. So workspaces have a container, address books have a container, configuration management databases have a container. A brand new container type never before seen in Footprint, the service portfolio, now exists. Service portfolios are where you can store your service level agreements and your contracts and your service level targets and work targets, right? As well as the services that will eventually appear in your service catalog when they're published and made live. So this service portfolio, new capability in Footprints, allows you to create service catalogs that have nothing whatsoever to do with your CMDB, unlike the old version of the product where the service catalog lived only in the CMDB. And that's largely because CMDBs, of course, can be federated, meaning multiple data sources, or they can be monolithic, meaning a single source of data. In this case, Footprints is still creating this as part of the CMDB technically, because the service catalog, of course, is a configurable item, but it is in its own separate container and accessible from here. And of course, knowledge. I can manage knowledge bases. I can create as many of them as I want. And unlike old versions of the product where you just really had a differentiator between customers and agent access to the knowledge base, you can now differentiate on a category by category basis who has access to which knowledge. So that means customer A can view the same knowledge base as customer B and see a completely different set of categories available to them, because customer B may have more access than customer A, even to the same exact knowledge base. Or you can create multiple separate knowledge bases so that different folks can have access to what they need, from biomed to human resources, or as I labeled my standard out-of-the-box one. Now, another fact about knowledge bases, in old versions of Footprints, knowledge bases came with every workspace you built. You couldn't build a workspace without getting a knowledge base with it, and you couldn't get a knowledge base unless you wanted a workspace. Right? Knowledge bases are their own entity now, and you can therefore search and create as many knowledge bases as you want to. I have 3 knowledge bases in the system. I have oodles of workspaces that I've created. And those workspaces were all built using what's called a business process. So for those of you familiar with old versions, these used to be templates, right? They called them templates, and you could build different kinds of workspaces from those. But those were single standalone functions. And in a world in which we are moving towards those good practices, right, those worldwide vetted best practices of ITIL, we want to be sure that these workspaces communicate with each other, because in most cases they need to. Incidents and problems and changes, oh my. They've all got to talk to each other. Footprints of yore didn't really make it so they did, right? You didn't have that concept of problems and incidents and changes in the service desk and all of those things working together. But if I were to create new functionality in my version of Footprints here, notice that I could create a help desk, and that gives me a help desk workspace and an address book. This is sort of like it used to work. Or a human resources workspace, right? Standalone workspace for HR, and an address book so we can have contacts linked. But then I could build IT service management that actually builds all of these containers at the same time and relates them all together for me so that they're good to go, and I can now manage all of my ITIL stuff as needed. I get a CMDB right away. I get a knowledge base, not with my knowledge in it, of course, any more than it would have my CIs in the CMDB, but I have a container to put them in. I have a container to maintain my service desk and my changes and my service portfolio, as well as my address book. So this builds like a wizard. It takes about 6 minutes to go through the entire process, and it will construct all of those objects, many of which we've already been talking about today on our session. But when I manage my workspaces in Footprints now, I'm going to drill into here. You can see that I have a list of workspaces, right? computer security and communications, and this does look a little different than the way the workspaces were listed before, to say the least. These are workspace containers. Think of them like folders, right? Like directories almost. Because each of these workspace containers can contain multiple workspaces, which is completely unheard of, right? Your versions of Footprints prior to version 12, all workspaces were single standalone threaded items, and you had to change workspace to workspace up here in order to get access to them. You could never really do what I'm doing right now, for example, move into administration, and then go back to your home screen and say, yeah, I'd like to keep working on that change request, right? The change request would be gone because you left it to go to administration. But now, everything in Footprints is completely multi-threaded, object-oriented. I can go back and start working on this change request if I need to, or the facilities request that I'd started, and then pick up right where I left off in my administrative area. So Footprints allows workspaces to live inside of workspaces, which it never used to do before, and that's really there so that you can concatenate like functions. Mine is called corporate services. You can concatenate like functions under a single workspace container, and therefore you can share fields across them, right? I can now build fields that are shareable across multiple containers, and I simply choose which containers I would like to put them in, right? Which workspaces should have them. I don't have to build the same field 19 times in each of the workspaces I have in order to share it across them all. That's what you had to do in the old version of the product in order to get data to share across those workspaces. Now I simply build whatever fields I want and then decide, hey, yeah, it'll go into that workspace, and maybe we'll put it in the service request workspace too. So we can add fields, create as many as you want, and add them directly to the workspace that you would like to from here. And that shared information is then available across them all. That means you can have corporate standards for priorities, and corporate standards for statuses, and corporate standards for impact and urgency, while changing other fields based on the needs of that particular corporate area or department that's using the workspace. So lots of flexibility there. But back to these record definitions, if I drill into my incident management workspace, you're going to see what workspace administration has become. This is it, right? This is workspace admin. I have a customer form, which I never had before. I have an agent form, which I always had before. That was all I had, in fact. The agent form was the customer form in the old versions of the product. I simply placed the fields on there with permissions for customers. So the customers never really had their own real estate. They were always sharing the agent real estate, which made for some really hairy events, depending on the kinds of permissions you needed on those fields and who needed to see them. And invariably, it meant that for customers who felt that they must have their customers classify the issue, right? That meant that you had two sets of categories visible to both agents and customers, which was really hairy and ugly. Now, customers can have their own version of the form, and when I drill into this, you will see what made its advent in Form Designer, right? Form Designer in version 11 of the product was taken actually out of version 12 before it was ready for prime time, and now it's in version 12 as well. So that means that I can drag the fields that I would like to out on my form, create brand new sections if I want to place my data onto. Well, if I could type, it'd be good. Here's my new section. And now I can simply take the fields that I would like to place out here and drag and drop them out, adding the values that I want, modifying any of the values in my drop-down. Of course, I can create all my own fields as well, but I can put any fields out here, including the ever-popular name that field. And when I'm on the section, I can change this section completely independently in terms of its width. So if I wanted this just to be 2 columns across and this one to be 5 columns across, no problem, right? Although I really wouldn't do that in this particular case, but you could. It crushed that all up, but that's fixable too, because when I click on this, I can decide how that's going to behave and what it's going to do and how wide it's going to be and good stuff like that. So Footprints isn't going to lock you in and say, oh, you changed it, now your layout is ugly. You can absolutely go in and make modifications and put things back kind of the way they were, or just grab the link control itself and move it to an entirely new spot on the form if you want to have it expand back out. So these forms are fully integrated with the product. Customers have their own real estate that they never used to have before. You can modify it to your heart's content. agents also have their own real estate, which you can, of course, create and modify, adding your own sections. You can even add custom sections to capture history and attachments, to capture appointments, so you can have calendar information show up in tickets now. And of course, if your workflow requires an authorization, you can have an approval section so that the folks who need to vote yes or no can come out and vote yes or no. And they can still do that through email like they used to do as well. So all of these fields and all this information, of course, need some kind of rule system to be able to manage it, because when I create tickets, I want to be sure they don't fall through the cracks. That has changed dramatically as well. Old versions of the product used to have rules for auto assignment, used to have rules for auto field, used to have rules for auto notifications of things. Basically, there was a bunch of different rule systems inside the old version of the product. And depending on what you wanted to do, you had to go into one or more of them in order to set the rules up. They were easy, they were point and click, and they worked, quite frankly. But all the rules and footprints of yore are taken away. They're gone, including escalation rules, and they've all been replaced by what are called business rules. And what business rules do, and I'll let you see this in grid view, what business rules do is work kind of like escalation rules do. Right? In the old version, they let you automatically decide what's going to happen based on criteria in the ticket. Ticket's too old, notify the supervisor. Ticket's just been submitted, make sure we add this following information to it, right? Or the ticket needs to send a pop-up to somebody because it's been sitting in their queue for 4 hours and not yet closed. Or you just need to change the priority. Escalation rules in the old version of the product, you decided the action of the rule at the end of the rule. So by the time you got done picking all the criteria, you then went to the tab and said, what's this rule going to do? That was the last thing you picked before you saved it. Now when you create business rules, the business rules decide at the beginning what the rule will do. Is this going to notify someone? Is this going to take action on screen, which was unheard of in the old version of the product? You had to do some custom scripting or something to make that work. Or after the ticket is saved, or will it change assignments? So all the rules of yore are blown away. They're gone. Yes, you can still automatically assign tickets, as you can see. Yes, you can still make auto-field things happen. But I can make changes directly on screen now. These two fields change values. That third field is going to light up on screen right before my eyes with its new value. I don't have to save the ticket first, like I used to have to in the old version of the product. And the rules themselves are pretty easy, right? You can see this is an on-screen rule. It's designed to happen on screen. This is what the rule writer looks like. You can decide, of course, what the trigger is. There isn't really much for triggers that you can pick from for on-screen rules, either on screen when the ticket's up or when I load the ticket. So if I'm pulling the ticket up after it's been saved, and of course this is on create or update, I've just created the triggers. I can now pick from conditions, and unlike the old version of the product where I had a big list of every field that existed really on a form, and I had to scroll around that form to find the fields I wanted, now I can simply look at all the fields that I have and decide which fields are going to be used as the criteria for my rule. And of course, when I'm done with all that, I can decide what the action is going to be, what's really going to happen in this form, change the assignment of the incident, or setting a field value, or changing the visibility of the field, etc., even writing to a log. So rules and footprints are utterly changed, much, much more powerful than they used to be, because when you combine rules with this new capability called visual workflow, what you have is the ability now to route tickets anywhere you need to, based on any criteria you can imagine. This picture is what Footprints is instructed to do with these tickets. The picture is the instruction set, and the instruction set is the picture. And any place where you see an R is not because it's piratey. That's not till September 14th, National Talk Like a Pirate Day. But instead, these are places where you can insert rules. Any place where the ticket is moving or changing statuses, I can add notifications. Right? So I can say, hey, you should notify somebody when we go from request to in progress. And that rule is right there, lets me do that. So I can pick any of these and say, hey, would I like to put a rule here? Sure, I would. And then I can create a rule that says when we move it from waiting for customer to complete it, we'll notify someone too. Right? But the really cool part is, if I wanted to add new elements to this workflow, like make it into an authorization cycle, I just choose the status that I would like to pick as my authorization status, and mine is pretty simple. I'm just going to pick this one. I check the box that says approval state, right? So I made this an approval state. And I can simply add my workflow controls for approved and rejected. Right? These are statuses that I've allowed. I'll put approved down here on the form. I'll put rejected down here. I'm going to do this real quick rather than try to make it all pretty for you. I'm going to do it right quick on the call. So we now have rejected as an option and approved as an option, and I don't want this ticket to get to in progress until it's been approved. So right now, this arrow allows it to move back and forth between request and in progress. I can change it back to request if I want. I can move it directly to in progress. That arrow lets me do it. I'm going to get rid of it. Can't happen anymore. Now I can go back to request, which means I would start the approval process again. That's fair enough. So we can go from request to approved, and we could go from request, and I'm going to put this over here, to rejected. Footprints draws the line there, kind of like a Visio diagram, right? So you can kind of see the dotted line. It's actually connecting here. And from rejected, I'm going to close this because no sense in keeping it alive, and I may put a business rule in here that notifies someone. If it's approved, though, I'm going to let you go to in progress, and I'll put in a business rule here that then notifies you of the fact that it's approved. And when I pick my approvers, very easy. Footprints now knows that the next state is approved because it's linked. And it also knows the next state is rejected because it's rejected. I didn't put an expiry state in, but I could have. That would have allowed me to expire the approval and say, nobody voted in time, it's declined, or whatever I needed to do. And then I can pick who my voters are, who's going to decide. This could be anyone and any number of anyones. Notice that customers can vote as well as technicians, so you don't need a special license to do that. You can pick it from team content. You can pick dynamic information based on fields inside of the Footprints form. You can even pick fallback voters, who's going to vote if no one does, right? Or if the thing gets expired. And you can pick that all in advance. So Footprints lets you create visual workflow now to manage literally anything, and you can have as many visual workflows as you would like. There's no limit on those. That means you can have a visual workflow for tickets that come in after hours because they're handled differently. A visual workflow for tickets that cost more than $1,000 because they have to pass through somebody's authorization hoop. A visual workflow for VIPs because we may handle them differently than other people. Multiple workflows for every kind of process that you want to realize. And to give you an idea of what that can become, I'm going to step out of my incident workspace for just a second. And I'm going to leave and go into my change management workspace. In this case, I have just one workspace underneath that container. It's called change request. We'll drill into it. If we look at the workflow processes, I have 3, one for each type of change, right? Emergency, normal, standard. And when you saw me playing over here in my change request, you'd probably notice that I have a field for the change type, standard, normal, and emergency. When I pick one of those, Footprints will let me move directly into one of these workflows, depending on what I chose. But the emergency workflow being awfully simple, right? Pretty straightforward. However, the normal change request workflow is anything but simple. This is a very big, very robust workflow. And all of this is really just the instruction telling Footprints what to do and when. So between business rules and visual workflow, Footprints can now automatically manage more functionality than ever before. And because we can gather information that we need to gather in Footprints, that means that, I can create my own fields, right? So I can create my own workflow, my own management of these tickets and these requests. But any field and any data I create is fully searchable and fully reportable in Footprints. In fact, there's no data that you can capture that you cannot search for. So all of your own custom fields, all of your own custom values, all of your own custom everything is fully searchable in Footprints. And notice that I can search from here, right? I can search from the administrative area if I'd like to find tickets. Yes, I can do that from the old version of the product, but I can't pick where I'm searching unless I create an advanced search. Here, I can simply pick, hey, you know what? I want to look at my corporate services and maybe my incident workspace, and I want to find all tickets that have anything to do with email. And even though I'm not sitting in that workspace right now, Footprints will come back with all of the tickets that have the word email mentioned in them out of my incident system. So simple searching, very, very simple, right? I can look for any keywords that I want, and I can do that from anywhere in the system and find anything that I care to find. I can also create what are called advanced searches. And unlike the old version of the product where creating a search was sort of a standalone action, right? The search was a search and I could find tickets with it. But when I wanted to run a report, I had to create the search again. because I had to find those same tickets again. You couldn't use the search as a query in the old versions of the product. Now when I create a search in Footprints, of course, I can name it, I can describe it, because they know you'll sleep between creation of the search and using the search somewhere down the road, or maybe you leave the company and people will go, hey, why did you create a search called Fred, right? What were you doing with that? So you can certainly document it. You can make it available for other people to see if you choose to share the search, and depending on their role, they'd be able to either see that search as shared. Private searches, of course, are always for you. You can decide where to search, so you can search across all objects in the system. And unlike the old version of the product where you did a cross-workspace search and it was subtractive, right? Every workspace you searched would gradually reduce the fields that were common across them to just a handful. Now you can blend multiple workspaces, multiple tickets, and search across every field in all of them to find the information that you want. So no matter what it is, I can combine incidents and problems and every other ticketing system that I'd like to in here and search across literally all of them simultaneously. Picking what your criteria is to search for, notice that I have common information. It's available in all of those workspaces. Plus, I have information just for incidents. And if we look a little further down, I have information that's decided for just problems, right? So I can search for literally any sets of criteria that I want. Let's just say we're looking for age of incident is greater than or equal to 4 days. So I'm looking for all those tickets that are getting a little old. Notice, too, that I can add additional search criteria, and I can and or each one of them individually. Before in Footprints, any kind of searching or any kind of rule writing meant that the entire search was either anded or ored, or the entire rule was. Now each criteria can be anded or ored independently as you need to. So I'm now looking for tickets that old. I'm going to go ahead and pick a couple fields here to include. Right, I don't really need the icon, I guess, but you can include pictures now inside of a ticket, so you can change those pictures dynamically. If I want the record number to appear up top, I'll just drag that up. When you publish it, you can include this and make it a query. So that means I can now use this as the basis for a report. I don't have to write the search again. And eventually, they will be coming out with a mobile app. They have not said when. When they do, you can make the searches available as a part of that mobile app. You do not need a mobile app to use Footprints on a mobile device at all. You can administer it and everything you need to do right from your handheld. It's HTML5, it scales beautifully, it works like a champ. You do not need a mobile app to use Footprints on your handheld device. So when I preview my results, you can see I got a few tickets. I can absolutely add additional information here, right? New columns if I want to, so if I want to know when it was created, etc. Easy peasy. And of course, I can save this and use it as a part of my reporting. But reporting is all different now too, and this is what I want to close up with, guys. I can still create the reports I used to build, right? So I can build metrics reports. This is what my ticket management reports are, the old versions of what were metrics reports. So turnaround times, or how long we're taking to, go from status A to status B, or watch lists in case I did a change over the weekend and I want to see whether or not that kind of issue is still happening or if the change fixed it. So I can literally create any kind of report I want, custom reports, cross-workspace, even dashboard reporting. And this is really cool because dashboards can now become simply the makeup of any report that you built. I'll talk about that in a sec. But no matter which reports you look at, no matter which reports you create, Footprints keeps account of how many you've built. I've got a couple of state reports. I've got some custom reports out here, as you can see. And if we drill into the My Report up here, and I go over here, this is my dashboard builder. This dashboard builder allows me to add any report that I have chosen to say, make available in a dashboard. Any report that I've checked the box for make available in a dashboard will be available here for me to add to a dashboard. And then I can make my dashboards mashups of any combination of reports I'd like. Right? So I can now build an infinite combination of dashboards to tell whatever story I want, because every report can be added to a dashboard or can be made a part of Service Core. And all that really means is I have the ability to include that particular report on my home screen as a widget if I want to, just like I did over here. So the reports themselves, these are built from the searches. So unlike the old version, you can now use a search to build a report. You can use this column to decide which fields you're going to include. You can see I have a few check boxes here. Those fields are showing up here in the list. And when I look at my list of information, yep, sure enough, here's all the stuff that I searched for in that search, all active tickets, tickets not yet closed. Many of you may be using Footprints now and exporting to Excel because it's not very pretty in Footprints when you look at it. And you can certainly do that now. I'm going to fly over here real quick. This is an export of that report in Excel. And you can see that the information in this is actually everything that came out of that particular report. I just dumped it as an actual Excel file right here on my screen. So you can certainly manipulate your data there if you want, but you don't have to. Footprints now includes all the ability to analyze your data right here on screen. I can create my own formula, add my own columns, do date math, things I could never do analytically in Footprints before. I can group it. I can cross-tab it. Crosstab Reports, right? This is pivot table stuff, guys, in Footprints now. So for those of you used to the old versions, that's an important step in the right direction, obviously. We can, of course, create charts as well, including charts that are not appearing inside of Excel, like a gauge chart, right? They don't have an option to create one of those. No matter what kind of report you build, you can export that information as Excel or PDF, as I said. And if you look here, you'll see that I have exported this report as a PDF. It's fully text selectable. So very, very clean, easy output. And I can just come down over here and choose to print this document or expand it or zoom it or whatever I want to do. Just print it out and take it with me to my meeting. Or if I've included charts on my report, I can include those charts as an output of PDF as well. And then I can see the PDF output of the chart right here. So Footprints is much more powerful when it comes to reporting, much more powerful when it comes to relating tickets to each other. And the rewrite in version 12 has really yielded us a much more powerful solution overall in Footprints that is still 100% codeless, 100% web-based, and 100% able to manage your processes in your organization. So if you want us to be able to talk with you a little bit more about Footprints or how we can help get you there if you're on a current version of the product and you'd like to move to V12, or any other questions or answers we can assist you with, please don't hesitate to let us know. We only had an hour today, guys, but as you can tell, there's a lot of information, a lot of capability under the hood. We tried to touch on the things that were the major differences, but there are certainly others as well. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Richard Longo to close out. But I want to thank everybody again for joining up on this session today, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thank you again, Greg. A lot of great information, and there's a lot of interest. And I have a lot of you that have messaged me asking me if this recording is available. It is. If you'll email me at rich.longo@flycastpartners.com. That's rich.longo@flycastpartners.com. When it is available next Tuesday, I will make sure that you get a link to it. In addition to Dell of MSA, you had a question. Dell, I have your email address. We're going to go ahead and send you an answer in the next couple days to your question when I get a chance to get it over to Greg. But we did run out of time today, and I apologize for that. But a lot of good information was passed. So any other questions or do you need any additional information, please reach out to us directly at 844-359-2278. That's 844-FlyCast. Or email me at rich.longo@flycastpartners.com, and we'll reach back out to you within a couple days. With that being said, Greg, once again, thank you very much. And for the rest of you, thank you for taking time out of your busy day, and enjoy the rest of your week.